Hello, guys. Welcome back to another video from Between the Ropes TV. Guys, we're just going to go straight into it tonight. We're going to feedback. We're going to give our thoughts on the Joyce Parker card and the Maxi Hughes Kid Galahad card. Both the big cards on tonight. Crazy one for the fans because you've got to pick and choose which fight you want to watch. But yeah, we're going to go straight to Yas. Yas, what were the highlights of this card? Because there was a lot of good fights on. You don't usually go for a Frank Warren card. You attempted to go for a Frank Warren card. So come on, tell us about it.
Yeah, I think the main event for me was pretty much fight of the night. Obviously, we had a few disappointments on the card, with fights being stopped early and that due to a head clash, particularly in the Heaney fight. But for me, the main event was a good fight. I think it was a good performance from Joyce. I didn't think anyone. I initially thought this fight would go to points and Parker would win, but that for me depended on the approach that Parker took. And yes, fair play to Parker. He stood. He has a great chin. He took the shots well, etc. But for me, he adopted the wrong kind of game plan. I feel like he stood and tried to match with Joyce's power too early. So I feel like that's where he kind of went wrong. And I feel like, he was too flat-footed. Parker's known for being like a quicker guy. So I feel like that's where it kind of went wrong for him. But for me, the fight of the night was the main event and good performance from Joyce.
Yeah. Interesting enough, in the group chat we've got going on, you were mentioning about the weight and how both fighters have come in heavier. In which fighter would it favour? Interesting enough, it sounds as though it didn't favour Parker too well.
No, I didn't, not at all. Obviously, I feel like he probably was trying to make a statement in this fight as well because he's on his quest right now to get back to that that big elite conversation when it comes to the main guys at the top. So I feel as though he thought, okay, let me pack on some weight. I'm starting to believe in myself a bit more, sitting down on my punches. So the extra weight is gonna maybe allow me to put dents in Joyce. And that will allow me, and he probably thought his speed would not be affected, but it clearly was, because naturally Parker is not used to being so heavy. He's used to being the lighter guy. And even though Joyce had a big weight advantage coming in at like 271 pounds, I just feel like it was the wrong game plan. He should have really, for me, just tried to, he's quicker than Joyce. And I feel like Parker's got a good IQ because he's been a world champion. He's been there, he's done it. And he should have adopted the game plan of where he just tries to jab, move, just always on his feet, because we know Joyce is a lot slower. He's methodical. So, he would have been chasing him around. And by engaging, Joyce is a bigger man, naturally stronger. And obviously, like, he's a juggernaut. When like he hits you everywhere. And Parker is a tough guy, but that's like, for example, the cut didn't really
yes,
help.
where next for Joyson? Because that's by no means an impressive performance. But don't forget, that's a fight he didn't have to take. He didn't have to take such a dangerous fight because on paper, Joe Parker's a pretty dangerous guy in terms of he could derail his world title perspectives, really. So in terms of who's out there, and we know what's tied up in the heavyweight division so far, what would you like to see next for Joyce?
Well, you just said it there, Ray. Obviously, Joyce did not have to take this fight, but look at his resume. Like, yes, he hasn't really fought before today. Obviously, his resume, he's got a good resume. So, and he's always taken on tough fights. Look at some of the names that he's got on his record. Some guys that have boxed at high level, etc. And remember, he's not even had 15 pro fights yet. I think today was his 14th or 15th fight. So still very early on in his career, but he is 37 years old. He just turned 37. So for me now, he's done it, and that was a big statement win, and he needed that, because people have always said, okay, he's beaten these people, but who has he done that to? Now, to knock out a former world champion in that fashion, who Anthony Joshua did not knock out. We've never really seen Parker get brutalized like that. Dillian White dropped him. but it wasn't like, it wasn't that kind of performance.
Mm.
So yeah, I
But
think that
who would you like to see him fight next?
I would probably say get a shot now. Probably he should probably get a shot at a title.
Right. Okay. I'm going to come to you then, Josh. Just to go down on the undercard. And Amanda Serrano was on. How did she look?
She looked good. It was tough because the atmosphere tonight was poor in the Manchester Arena. A lot of talk about poor ticket sales, and obviously only the bottom tier was open. But it was just a bit flat, and the fight was okay. I think Serrano did what she had to do. She won convincingly. I had it 97-92. The one scorecard was wide at 99-92. But it was one of those. It was an economic performance. I think it's probably the fairest way. Serrano did exactly what she had to do. She looked like she had a couple of rounds off, which, to be honest, Mahfoud really tried, but I think there's just levels to it, and those were the rounds that she obviously won. But yeah, no, Serrano did what she got to do. It'll be interesting to see what comes next, because she talked about wanting the final piece of the puzzle, which obviously undisputed. Obviously, her promoter's Jake Paul. Eddie Hearn promotes the other piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So with their now going to court over comments this week, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. All right. Well, just before I come and ask you a question about Amanda Serrano, I've just seen a comment pop up here by boxing historian Davey Fulton. Evening, Davey. Thanks very much for joining us. He's put on here, I felt that Parker was trying to fight like Fury on the ropes, but only Fury can fight like Fury. Do you think that's part of the influence of Andy Lee there? Yes.
I feel like yeah, that is because Fury and Parker are two different guys. Obviously, yes, he's been training in Morecambe with Fury, so obviously he's gonna try and adopt different habits and whatever that Fury does. But Parker needs to, for me, try to stick to his game a bit more. And we know he's not the biggest of punchers, and he's not the strongest of, he's not the most roughest of guys. So he needs to do what works for him. And I feel like what he was working on before, plus a little bit of this, a more aggression that we saw in that Chisora fight, that kind of performance, but a little bit more boxing would have worked perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think Davey's touching upon that, because on this one he says, no matter how good Joyce was, I never saw that knockout coming. From Davey's kind of suggesting he didn't see Joyce opening up like that. I'm going to go to Dom. Evening, Dom. Thanks very much for tuning in. Do you boys think Joyce has the best chin in the division? If not, who does? Josh, rate that one for us.
Well, I've just seen Davey's back here, in fairness, and so he's come back to Dom. With Dom having a good chin doesn't mean how hard you can get hit. It means how well you can recover too if you get put down. Joyce hasn't fought an elite once and can't be getting caught by Wilder, etc. Usually, I agree with you there, Davey. But for me, surely there's both elements to that. Dom's right, and you're right. Obviously, it's the full package. And Joyce's chin tonight was incredible. Parker landed 7 or 8 shots that I think would have certainly rocked, if not put down, the majority of heavyweights. And Joyce just took them. He wasn't marking up or anything. It was just scary to watch, to be totally honest. And got to be so soul crushing if you're Joseph Parker, because you're landing great shots that are going to be putting down heavyweights. And he's a former world champion, so just there in terms of I think we'd have to say Joe Joyce has fought in the elite tonight. With Joseph Parker, former world champion, good resume. I know he's lost against like Dylan White and Anthony Joshua, but there's no shame in either of those losses. So I would say, for me tonight, this is Joe Joyce's almost coming out party. In terms of, there's been a lot of question marks. His previous biggest win was over Daniel Dubois, but Dubois is untested, so that may be a win that ages really well with time. But right now, it's tough to comment. But for me, the win over Joseph Parker tonight really that cements Joe Joyce as someone legit in the heavyweight division. So now, I mean, I'm liking the debate that we're getting, but now I think for me, Joyce's chin, he's not been down, he's not been tested. Yes, he's not been in with Wilder. Fury or Joshua or, you know, one of these known punchers. But it's definitely up there with one of the best chins in the division at the minute, because what he has faced, he's not been tested.
Okay, fair one, fair enough. Going back to Amanda Serrano and Josh, I did say I would get back on her, but I wanted to kind of talk about her first before I got the questions on Joyce in. There's clamour, isn't there, for that second fight with Katie Taylor sometime next year. But do you think she should concentrate on becoming undisputed in the featherweight division, or do you think she'd have another crack at stepping back at lightweight?
Sorry, was that me? For me? Or
Yeah.
I think it's tough. I think it's always going to be hard to say no to the money that is going to be in a Taylor rematch. So if that can be made, then I think that'll be the route she'll go. However, as I said, the name escapes me, but the WBA champion's promoted by Hearn. So whether there's a bit of a 2-fight deal there, because let's be fair, if Serrano becomes undisputed at featherweight, 2 undisputed champions on top of Serrano's already incredible legacy, the Taylor rematch only gets bigger, and it's always going to be there as long as nobody loses. And I think with what we are seeing with the likes of Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano in their respective divisions, they are head and shoulders above a lot of the rest. I know we talk about Taylor's age potentially starting to come into it, but I think that's how it'll go. I think she'll go undisputed if it can be made, and Jake Paul and Eddie Hearn haven't fell out too much, and then she'll go Taylor.
Do you think Katie Taylor can go and last another full year boxing, all those hard camps? I mean, she's not looked great in her last 3 or 4 fights. Let's be honest. Do you not think time's catching up with her now?
I think time's starting to catch up with her, yeah. But I think she looked good against Serrano. She had a couple of rounds which were a bit.
Round 5.
Yeah, round 5 in particular. I think the 4th round as well wasn't great, if I remember right. But she came through it. She showed that heart. She's got the experience. And I do think when fighters reach this point where they're starting to be on the turn, what they might lack in natural skills that have left them, they make up for in experience. And, you know, we saw that later on in the Serrano fight where the experience, she was just nicking rounds, just doing enough. So I think she'll still be all right. I think she'll do, I mean, she's back at the end of next month, so that'll be the end of this year. Presumably then they'll try and make a big fight March, April time. And then, so potentially I genuinely could see Katie Taylor having 3 more fights and then calling it a day.
Okay. All right. Fair point. And yes, just very, very quickly, just talk us through a couple of fights very, very briefly on your other card for that. Mainly Nathan Heaney, Mark Heffron. How did those guys get on?
Nathan Heaney, obviously his fight went on for like only 3 rounds, I believe. It got stopped due to, what was that, sorry?
5 rounds. It was in the 5th because it got to the technical. Yeah.
And then obviously he got the right decision, because for me he was ahead for me. He won. I gave him 3 rounds, I believe. So for me he was winning that fight, and obviously the Esserman and Antwi fight, it was an okay fight. I feel like Antwi started off quite strong in the first round. And then as the fight started to wear on, Esserman kind of, took control and just won the fight for me quite convincingly. But it was a good performance. Yeah. And so for me, the Amanda Serrano fight and Mahfoud, it was quite flat-footed. But it was nonetheless Serrano won that quite convincingly.
Yeah, how about the Mark Heffron fight and Anthony Kakachi, because they were on the bill, weren't they?
Yeah. Kakachi fought. I don't think Mark Heffron fought, did he?
He did.
Yeah.
He got stoppage win.
Yeah, I watched from the Kakachi fight.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kakachi, for me, good performance. He won that, obviously. For him now is I feel like he won that quite convincingly. The other guy that he fought hadn't been active for about 13 months or so. So it was quite a dominant performance for me. He stuck behind a jab well, he boxed well, and onwards and upwards for him.
Excellent. And he's picked up an IBO world title, so that's good for him. That brings us on to the DAZN card. which unfortunately didn't have as many highlights for what you guys had. So you guys definitely got the better end of the draw. I got the short straw. But the main event, it was a purest dream. But if you wanted to see explosiveness, you were disappointed. It's funny because some of the so-called pundits had it a really close fight, which was reflected in one of the judges' scorecards. I had it 117-111 to Maxi Hughes, but the scorecards were 114-114, 116-112, and 115-113 in favour of Maxi Hughes. I had Maxi Hughes running away with it for the first 4 rounds. He just boxed superbly. It was a strange fight because Galahad, as you know, he's a switch hitter. He was coming forward, but just because he was encroaching forward, he was looking more aggressive than he usually does, because he doesn't usually like to throw a lot of punches. He likes to step on his opponent's toes, maybe throw a few counters, and all of a sudden he was aggressive without throwing shots. So I think some people were giving him rounds because he was seen to be more aggressive. But what I say is it's effective aggression, and there wasn't enough effective aggression from Galahad, and there wasn't enough clean, hard punches from him. His punch output was, as usual, quite low. And I just thought Maxi was just winning the battle of the jabs. Maxi landed some good hard lefts, but then Galahad, when he's fighting in the orthodox position, so the orthodox stance, he looked better, to be honest. He started to let his hands go a bit more. So yeah, it kind of went this way I thought it would be. I kind of said this fight isn't going to be, if you're looking for a knockout, you're looking for excitement, this isn't your fight. But if you're a purist, this is your kind of fight. So the main event from that point of view went the way I thought it was. Got another comment from Davey, boxing historian. He says, I'm going to join you guys on camera for a Fury AJ breakdown if it goes ahead in December. Excellent, Davey. I mean, personally, I don't think that fight's going to go ahead. No. But if it does, you're more than welcome, as is anyone else. But personally, I just don't think that fight's going to go ahead. I think in terms of fights that are penciled in, I think Spence Crawford goes ahead. If not November, I'll go ahead. Definitely go ahead, whether it be December or January next year, because the contracts are signed. But AJ, Joshua, I always knew not to get excited with that one, because there's a lot of I's to be dotted and a lot of T's to be crossed. But on the core main event, it's funny, isn't it, with the zone cards, because in my opinion, the dipping in quality, and that's just my opinion. But not with a female fight. They're absolutely electric, and again, this one didn't disappoint. Yes, I had it one-sided in favour of Terry Harper, but it was full of excitement. Here's a comment here. We've got a comment from Chris Welsh. Just sub, lads. Thank you very much, Chris. Great to have you. Great to have you tune in and listen to us. So just drop us a comment on what you thought of the DAZN card and the BT card. And the guys who just ran through the BT card, and I'm just giving them a brief overview of the DAZN card coming up to the Terry Harper Hannah Rankin fight. I thought Terry Harper was excellent. I thought she was really, really good. All that talk about the jump up in weight, really to talk about jumping up from lightweight, but she actually jumped up from super featherweight, and she looked so comfortable. She looked so strong. She made Hannah Rankin look slow. She made Hannah Rankin look plodding. Her jab was on point. She couldn't miss with her backhand. And the other thing I liked about Terry Harper is I thought she wouldn't want to engage, because it's one thing moving up in weight, 24 pounds or whatever it was. But then when you're facing somebody who's moved down in weight, they're naturally bigger, and on fight night, they're even heavier. But Terry Harper still mixed in on the inside with Hannah Rankin. She gave as good as she got in the clinches. Naturally, she started to tire as the fight drew on. She started to she didn't engage as much. But I just thought that was Terry Harper being intelligent, not wanting to use up all her energy, getting tied up. So I thought that was a really class performance, and it sets up. I mean, Eddie Hearn's trying to build it, but for me, that fight's ready now the rematch between Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas. That's good to go. Got another comment by Chris. Well-deserved domination win by Joyce. He won every single round for me. Not comfortably, was close in most rounds, but Joyce was far too good tonight, and that KO topped it off to win the fight statement. But it's what you boys were saying, wasn't it? It was a statement win, and it really it is coming out party like you said, Josh. So it was a terrific performance. But as Yas seems to think Joyce is ready for a world title now, surely you must share that view, then, Josh.
Do you know what? I'm going to be completely honest. I don't share that view. I think the Parker win's a great win, but I think it's one of those where you need another one, maybe two before, because let's be honest, the people you look at who's got the belts right now in Usyk and Fury, they're like serious talents, like to the level we could be talking in 20 years' time, comparing them to some of the greats. I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm not saying we do it now, but they've definitely got that potential. For me, I'd love to see him in with a Dylan White. Who knows what's going to happen with AJ and Fury? As we've just said, I agree with you, Ray. I don't think we will get that. But if not, the Joshua fight makes a whole lot of sense at the minute. I just think at the minute, because while tonight his chin was incredible and he was coming forward.
Josh, to cut you off, is that not risky for him, though? I mean, it was a big risk taking Parker, and he took care of Parker, but it put him in with Dillian White when technically he could be in line for a title shot. Do you not just think at his age he should just wait it out?
No, his age is exactly why I think don't wait, because he's 37 now. If Usyk goes and fights Wilder early next year, or if he gets that Fury fight, that'll be a rematch. So that takes next year, because they're only going to fight twice a year. So then he's 38, approaching 39. You know, what's he supposed to do in that time? You know, he's also going to want the paydays. Well, there's only so much money you make for fighting a Christian Hammer or a Tom Schwartz. So a Dylan White represents probably just as big a payday as fighting an Usyk does, if we're being brutally honest, unless a Saudi deal comes in, but they probably wouldn't. And what we did learn tonight, I alluded to it earlier, I'm a fan of Joyce and I'm a big fan of Joe Parker. I was hoping Parker would genuinely get the win tonight, but they're not big ticket sellers. You know, the fact that you had the top tier all cordoned off shows me that, you know, Joyce, if you want a big fight and a big payday, he's going to need a dance partner. He gets that with the likes of a Dylan White. So that's for me. I can understand where Yas is coming from. And in a perfect world, if he could get Usyk next in, say, February, then yeah, I would say do it. But realistically, that's just not going to happen. So then you've got to look for, you know, for me, you're looking at the paydays at this point, and you can't go stale fighting no marks.
Fair enough. I just want to get to Stephen's point. Stephen, thanks very much for tuning in. Says Maxi result getting a lot of stick on Twitter. Galahad only threw a few jabs and headbutts. How can he be disappointed with that result? Yeah, I mean, I had it wide. I don't know how you scored it, Stephen. Let us know how you scored that fight. I had it 117 to 111 in favour of Maxi Hughes. Some of the pundits, I mean, I tend not to have the commentary on when I'm watching fights. But looking about the place, I was getting told that some people had it close. Some people had it a draw. I couldn't see that at all. I thought Maxi Hughes was running away with it, if I'm being brutally honest. Chris says, I had Joyce to win on points before the fight. I expected Parker to start quickly and be first half fighter. I expected Joyce to be second half fighter. I expected a fight at two halves, but it was domination. Yeah.
I think we all sort of thought that was how it would play out. Chris, to be fair, he's also come back with this one.
Yeah, it was Joyce only test so far, and he's passed it. I see where Josh is coming from. I agree with him. Joyce still needs another test for me as well. But credit where credit's due.
100%.
Yeah, fair play, fair enough. Yeah, and I'll just point there by Davey. I wish they'd dissolve the IBO title. No one cares about it, and I'm fed up of hearing IBO's holders' introduction as world champions. It's like the WBU belt years ago. I suppose so, but you know, for the likes of Anthony Kakachi, who won an IBO, Terry Harper, who's again won an IBO. You know, these are, I suppose, for in the women's boxing, it's a world title belt in itself. You know, they just get what they're given. In the men's, and Chris Eubank comes to mind. They're just passing it off as a valid world title. But for me, it's no different. I don't know what you two boys think. It's no different from when the WBA have got a super world champion and a regular champion. Really. Yes. Can you argue with that?
Nah, pretty much. I agree with literally what you said. That's just how it is for me, to be honest.
Yeah, Josh.
No, I totally agree. I think for me, a lot of it depends on who you fought for it. You know, for example, same with the WBA regular. Lee would beat Zhukan, who was at the time ranked as most people's #1 featherweight. So then it becomes hard to argue with that as a valid world title. But then an IBO situation, Chris Eubank beat Reynold Quinlan. You know, there's levels to the game, isn't there? But I've got no issues with an IBO title when it's, like Joshua and Klitschko technically fought for it. And obviously it was on the line in Joshua's other defenses. Then it's another piece to the puzzle, a smaller one, granted. And I totally get where Davey's coming from there. But it's tough, isn't it? The reality is, and we all know it, there's just too many belts in boxing nowadays. It's all for sanctioning fees. I don't sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it stinks of corruption, doesn't it, to be totally honest?
Yeah. I want to get onto this point. Chris is, that's Davey again saying Hatton and Manny Pacquiao was fought for the IBO. But Chris has said a really good point here. Maxi Hughes won deservedly for me. I had Galahad to win on points before the fight. Wasn't shocked who won this fight, to be honest. Maxi won my score on my scorecard comfortably, no debate. Yeah, I mean, I had Maxi Hughes to win the fight. I remember saying to the boys, and they'll back me up, it just reminded me so much of when Lee Selby stepped up from the same weight class to lightweight. For me, it's just too big a jump to do in one. Although he looked physically, he didn't look small in the ring. He's not fought against solid lightweights before. Taking a punch from a solid lightweight's different. Also against somebody who's a lot busier and who moves. And Galahad isn't really a puncher to slow Maxi Hughes down. So I was kind of thinking, what's Galahad going to bring in order to win that fight? Had he been a puncher, okay, fair enough. But he's not. And he's not really active enough. So that was my reason for going for Maxi Hughes. Chris, let us know your thoughts. But yeah, Josh, I mean, based on Maxi Hughes' win, that surely should open up some doors in the lightweight division for the rest of the for the world titles. I know they're held by Devin Haney, but Devin Haney, he's going to beat George Kambosos in next month. Do you think he's at least in with a shout?
You'd like to say yes, wouldn't you? But obviously, it's a 2-fight deal. Haney signed with Top Rank, obviously, for this Kambosos fights. It depends if he goes back to the zone. If he goes back to the zone, possibly being with a shout of it as like a welcome back to the zone.
Yeah.
But the issue is you're going to be queuing for a long time because I'm a fan of Maxi Hughes, but he's not #1 in the division, is he? Just banging down the door in terms of name value. There's a lot of big fights for Devin Haney at 135 or even 140 if he moves up, which has been also talked about. I'd love to see the Ryan Garcia fight. For me, it's been talked about. Both are in the queue for a world title. That's the one.
Yeah. And also, don't forget Shakur Stevenson. He had a great win on Friday night. He could be one to watch out for, couldn't he, Yas?
Yeah, 100%. Shakur Stevenson, he had that fight on Friday night. I still need to catch up on it, but definitely he's in there. He's up there. He's a good fighter. He's a good boxer. So we'll see what's next.
Yeah. Davey said Mayweather has a video on YouTube explaining why he never cared about Undisputed, and it's like you say, too many sanctions, and the WBC are the worst. Diamond, silver, interim, etc., etc. Yeah, the WBC and the WBA, in my opinion, are just as bad as each other. The WBC have a belt for anything. 2 British fighters fight, and they've got a Battle of Britain belt. It's getting a bit ridiculous now. But that's unfortunate. That's the way boxing is gone. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing to take away from this, and you guys watching and also in the chat can pull me up on this if you think I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the fans The boxing fans seem to know who the real champions are, who the real best fighters are. And as long as that stays the same, then really they can throw as many belts in the sport as they want. We'll still know who the real champions are. So that's what I would say with that, Davey. But yeah, just going back onto Joe Joyce then, Yas. Obviously, he's had that win. Do you think? I mean, Josh is saying Dillian White. I know you're saying he's ready for he's ready for the world title. So how would you think he fares with the likes of Usyk then?
That's because I feel like it'll be a tough fight. In an ideal world, he should fight for a title. But look, thinking about it now, actually, I kind of do agree. Probably retract my point. Because I don't think.
Oh, you're allowed to hold your own opinion. You don't have to agree with Josh.
I was thinking about it, and I was thinking realistically, yeah. If Fury and Usyk is, we don't know how that's gonna go, right? And we don't know when they're gonna fight now as well. Probably some point.
They may not even fight.
Exactly. So, and in the meantime, Joyce can't, like, obviously he's had that test with Parker, so now he can't go back down to fighting the Christian Hammers and them kind of guys. He needs to maintain that level or step it up. If he's going to have a keep busy fight, he needs to fight someone within that category. So maybe a Dillian White or maybe even a Wilder or something like that, and then have that fight with whoever the champion is. But how we'd get on with them guys, I feel like he would give them problems, but I feel like Usyk is too clever and he'll just pick him off and just move. As fit as Joyce is, I just feel like because of like how slow.
Do you think Usyk can negate that jab?
I don't know. I just feel like he's too cute, and he can just he can get out of the way. He just keep him off and just frustrate him, because Usyk's quick, and he's a southpaw, and he's fought. You know, obviously Joyce and AJ are different, but he's been in there, like he's filled into a heavyweight now. So I feel like, you know, with his IQ, with his skills, and I feel like he's got a way, you know, I feel like in his mind, he's got a way on how he'd beat all these guys. So I feel like he kind of knows already what game plan he's going to approach. And I just feel like Usyk will be too clever for him. He'll be too quick. And Joyce will be swinging, and just trying to land punches that, you know, I know where are never going to land.
Nice one. Chris says Shakur Stevenson needs that step up to 135. For me, he has bigger fish to fry, despite him being stripped of his belts, which is a shame. But I feel he was going to try to move up to lightweight anyway. Yeah, I think he was, to be honest. Which you know, you're right. It is a shame, because I thought he would have been trying to become undisputed at super featherweight. But this is what I said to a few of the boys on the boxing chats earlier. Sometimes at his age, your body just can't lose that extra pound and a half or whatever it is. But he's still going to be a problem at lightweight. Shakur Stevenson's still going to be a problem for these lightweights. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Right, I'm going to take this next point. Davey's in the chat. Let's make a belt for Between the Ropes TV, and we can fight Imran TV, the boxing voice, or last bell in a Royal Rumble. Now, look, Chris has said it actually further down, don't get started on YouTube boxing, and we oppose it too. We're not the biggest fans of it. However, I'm not going to lie, I'm a sucker for a pound note, and if any of those channels want to do this and there's money in it, I'm more than down for this. I don't know about you two, but I'm putting Ray forward. Ray will get in the ring, and I'll sit back and count the money. Right?
I want a rehydration clause, because them lads on the boxing voice look kind of big. So I want a rehydration clause, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we got this, Ray. Don't worry.
Yeah, we got it. They've got a comment from Greg. Greg, how you doing, pal? Real GST. He says, good result for Big Joe Joyce tonight. I knew Parker was tiring, but the KO came out of nowhere. Great finish. Yeah, I mean, these two boys were watching it, Greg. That's what they've alluded to.
I was going to say, I'll take that one if you want, Ray. Just obviously, bear in mind, you were covering the DAZN card for us. I'd totally agree. I was actually just thinking that Parker was coming back into this. And I mean, I know Chris has said he gave every round to Joyce. I gave definitely 3 rounds to Parker myself. I just thought the first half of the fight, it was whether you liked the relentlessness of Joyce or the more eye-catching shots, but fewer and further between off Parker. But for me, he had 3 rounds. And then I was just thinking, oh, he's coming back into this, and I was starting to question in my own head and do the maths. Could Parker potentially nick a draw, or could something happen? And then that KO just came out of absolutely nowhere. And and let's not forget as well, it's worth mentioning, he's the first person to stop Joseph Parker in amateur or pro ranks. So that's a big feather in the cap, isn't it? In fairness to Joyce.
Yeah, it sounds it. Yeah, and I suppose you both put really good arguments about what happens for him next. Does he go straight in for a world title on the back of that win, or does he take another fight of the same caliber? Yeah, we're gonna have to explain that joke now, but we have to we save it for another night. But that's a cracking little joke there by Davey. Chris says Parker showed real heart, but need to show more of that real heart in his hands. Didn't do enough for me. Yes,
Again,
would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would probably agree with that, because for me, what was I gonna say? I was gonna say, for me, the writing was kind of on the wall. When Joyce, because you saw obviously Joyce has got the granite chin and whatever. We saw when Parker was landing crisp and clean shots, they weren't phasing Joyce. In fact, they got a reaction out of him. Parker would land, and Joyce will come straight back up with 2s and 3s. Whereas when Joyce landed, Parker looked like, kind of didn't want to be there. Like, yeah, he was brave, and a couple times he swung with him, but the heart wasn't enough for me. And when he got the cut, for me, from then on, I knew the fight was only going one way. I didn't think he'd get knocked out, but I thought he'd take so much punishment with the relentlessness of Joyce, and then the towel will be thrown in, because that was quite a bad cut. And we've never seen Parker beaten up and bruised up like that in a fight. At times, to me, he looked like he kind of didn't want to be there. But I just feel like he remembered, it's a big stage. He can't just go out that easily. So, he went out on his shield pretty much. And credit to him, he did try to get up after the knockdown, but I feel like it was just too much punishment, and the fight was only going one way.
Greg says here he had it 98 and 93 going into 11th. Josh, would you concur with that?
Yeah, I can get on board with those sort of numbers. To be fair, as I said, I had 3 definite rounds for Parker. There was 1 or 2 that I sort of thought, you could possibly score it either way. The only thing I didn't like, and I'd mention it again, obviously we've talked about the atmosphere not being brilliant, but also BT, and I know various sort of people broadcasters get accused of biased commentary, but I didn't like the commentary tonight. The first round for me, Parker won it. I tweeted about it. It was general consensus Parker won it, and you still had the BT panel trying to justify not a lot happened, or potentially Parker just nicked it, but you'd give it Joyce. And I don't know what you guys thought in the comment section. There's a few of you watching now, but I'm not a fan of stuff like that, so I can definitely get on board with what Greg's saying there. I'm loving these comments coming in right here, actually. Sorry, just to change.
Yeah, I was just going to jump on that point real quick before I get onto that. I had the same problem I was told from the DAZN card. Again, I was telling you moments ago when I was breaking down the Galahad Hughes fight, that every time Galahad encroached forward with his feet, it was fantastic work by Galahad. Galahad was throwing feints, and again, they were giving the round to Galahad for throwing feints, not landing shots. Again, there was a lot of bias, and you could tell some commentators and some pundits were favouring some fighters over others, and that kind of political type of fighters kind of needs to be stamped out the game as well. But yeah, we're going to go to a comment by Camis. Thank you very much, mate. You guys do a brilliant job. We're just fans. We're just feeling about how we see it. We just tell it like it is. Boxing Historian says best boxing panel show on YouTube. Thank you very much, pal.
Can we get an actual award for that though, Davey? If you could get us like a trophy, send it out. We can give you our address. So I'd quite like it.
Basically, Josh wants to put it on the back next to his door. You see that little plaque there that he's got?
Oh,
yeah, he wants an award next to there. He thinks he's signed a cowl. You see,
don't be jealous, Ray. Don't be jealous. You can get a plaque too.
Yeah, I can't fit one on my wall. That's why. Yeah, this is what I was asking you earlier. Yes. Greg says, "What do you think about Nathan Heaney? I've watched his last 3 fights, and he shows a bit of talent. Bad cut though. So I'm assuming it was Jack Flatley that's got the cut. Yeah. From what he's saying, but
No. It was Heaney. Heaney got the
oh,
cut.
is
And Heaney got the cut. Yeah.
okay? All right. Okay. So he says, "What do you think about him? Obviously, he's got a big following from Stoke. He's been pushed, hasn't he, because of that following? He's coming through at middleweight. Do you see him making any noise there?
I don't know. For me, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like, yes, he's talented. He's a good boxer and he's got a big following. But I just feel like maybe had tonight have gone differently, I just feel like maybe I could have been able to judge to see, you know, where exactly do I feel as though he would, you know, kind of go. So I feel like maybe I probably need to see one more fight. But I do rate him as a fighter. I'm just not sure, to be honest, like if he can go all the way yet. I feel like I probably need to see maybe 1-2 more tests, and then we'll see where he can go.
And I'll ask you the same question, Josh, just before I move on, because in that division you've got the likes of Felix Cash, and I know you're a massive Felix Cash fan. We saw Denzel Bentley the other day; he looked pretty good. And above that, you've got the likes of Janabek, who looks pretty damn special. How far do you think Nathan Heaney can go?
I'll be honest, and I don't want to sound negative. I hate being negative on this channel, but I think he's probably found his level, to be fair. He was definitely winning against Flatley tonight. And, you know, a lot was talked about by the commentary team about how Flatley's probably boxed the better opposition, albeit down at light middleweight. But for me, Heaney wasn't showing real dominance. I don't know if there was the spite in his punches, which I've thought that about him before, to be totally honest. Go back a week and compare that to Denzel Bentley, who went in there and did a job on Marcus Morrison, who's no mug himself. I think Nathan Heaney'd have a tough night. I think you see some arguments on social media about him being guided. I wouldn't say protected, but definitely guided because of how many tickets he sells. And obviously he's quite open about wanting to fight at Stokes football ground. And I think I'd quite like a Denzel Bentley versus Nathan Heaney at Stokes ground for a British title if it can be made for next year. I think that would be good. But I think, you know, Heaney's definitely British level. I can't really see him going above that. I think Felix Cash would take him to absolute bits.
Yeah. Chris says, "I'm glad I'm subbed to this channel. You know what you're talking about. None of these people who talk utter nonsense." Thank you very much, Chris. I mean, sometimes Josh goes on a little bit of a tangent sometimes when you talk about Frank Warren, but I knew that one was coming. You know, we've all got our weaknesses, but we appreciate the comment. We really, really do. Greg says, "I think he'll make a good domestic prospect." He's on about Nathan Heaney here, but not much more, to be honest. I just like the guy's style. Fair enough. He has got a fan-friendly style, which explains why he has a big following. But then Greg also makes a point about Janabek and Denzel Bentley, because that fight is going to be announced for later this year. I don't know whether you guys have actually seen Janabek before, or the guys in the chat, but I worry for Denzel Bentley in that fight. I really, really do. Hats off for him for taking that fight. It shows he's got some real bottle. I worry for Bentley taking that fight. Janabek is probably the one guy I think that can cause Golovkin problems and probably beat Golovkin in the middleweight division, if I'm going to be brutally honest.
Can I ask you a question, Ray? Obviously, we've spoke quite openly. We still back Golovkin. This pre-Canelo last weekend, we backed Golovkin to still mop up really at middleweight. After last weekend, do you still think you can, or does a Janabek or anyone else for that matter actually come in and take over? Because I'm going to be honest now.
I always thought Janabek with his style could give Golovkin problems because he's a southpaw and he's really, really good on his feet. Although Golovkin cuts the ring off really, really well, Janabek's a bit of if you think of somebody that is skillful as Demetrius Andrade, but better in terms of he doesn't gas out. He throws a lot of punches. He's accurate and he's spiteful. Then yeah, I would have said that Janibek would have given Golovkin problems before the Canelo fight. Now afterwards, I think he can probably beat him. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not going to change me fast because I still think Golovkin can beat Jamal Charlo. And I still think he beats a lot of even now, I still think he beats a lot of middleweights out there. But I think the fight with Janibek is probably closer, more of a 50-50 now. Whereas before I was like 60% Golovkin. I was more, it was more of a 60-40 split.
I would agree. Just to add on that, actually, I think for me, it's a case of what does Golovkin really have left, and to fight someone like Janibek. Janibek is a good fighter, and Golovkin could beat most of the middleweights. But I do see him if that Bentley fight. I'm quite worried for Denzel Bentley. I can't lie.
Yeah, but I'm really worried.
Fair play to him for taking on the fight, and who knows, he may even surprise us. But for me, that's kind of like quite clear who I think is going to win. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Greg says time for Golovkin to retire. I don't know. I mean, I know he's not looked great in his last 2 or 3 fights. He didn't look great against Maratha. He didn't look great against Daryachenko, who he fought. He got those 2 wins, probably laboured performances, but I still think there's enough about him. I still think he beats Charlo, and if he beats Charlo, all of a sudden he's back in that mix again. In terms of you can no longer write him off. And it's a same sort of sim like Pacquiao. When he came back and he got his win before he ended up losing to Ugas. So I would still say Golovkin's got something. He's not completely spent, but what I would say is it's the beginning of the end. Pretty much as the way I see it with Katie Taylor. We're starting to see the real start of the decline, apart from Katie Taylor's not officially lost, and Golovkin has. Greg says, yeah, the last 3, I'd say the last 3 cans, the decline he's said to have, but he's scheduling to fight Lara. Thoughts on that, guys? Josh, that is rumoured to be true, actually. That's he's supposed to be fighting Lara. 2 old men going at it. How do you see that one going?
I think Golovkin wins and wins well. But I was going to say I've got no issues with it. I can see the thought process for him retiring. We talked about it last week. He stayed in Germany too long, and then he was just probably the most avoided fighter on the planet for a good while, probably his peak years. So I've got no issues with that fight happening and Golovkin going out on a win, which I would back him to do. I think that's how that would probably go. I just wanted to, it's moving on slightly, but Chris brought in a great point. Next big fight, 8th of October, Eubank Ben. Can't wait for that. Love the face-off. Eubank Jr.'s confidence and arrogance rattling Ben. Well, it's worth noting, Chris Eubank, from that face-off, his sex ban started today, and he put up a great picture of him taking it out on his pad, man. So I'd agree with Chris. I'm massively excited for that fight. And I did have the penny dropped earlier that, we're 2 weeks away. I cannot wait for that fight.
Are you excited for that as well, Yas?
Yeah, I am. I'm excited to see how the fight actually goes with all the build-up. So far for me, in terms of like all the mind games and winding him up, Eubank is winning. Obviously, as time's gone on, we've seen Conor obviously just get down and just focus with the training. But obviously, every time they're near each other, you just sense that the blood boiling. So I'm quite interested to see how it goes.
Do you think he is winning though, Yas? Because I know what you're saying, and definitely the memorable bits of the face-off and the press conference were things that Eubank said. But I do just think Conor Ben's got that sort of steely look of determination about him where it doesn't matter what Eubank's saying, it's not going in, and Ben just looks determined to go in and do a job, which, if he does, can be dangerous. Dangerous for Eubank because he's going to go in there with the bit between his teeth, but also dangerous for Ben if he's going to start fighting on emotion.
100%. Because he's going in there. Firstly, let's answer the first bit. I do believe, in terms of like the mind games and the war of words, yes, Eubank is a little bit ahead, but I just feel like Conor, as the fight is edging on and it's getting closer, he's obviously got good people, knowledgeable people around him. You know, his dad will obviously tell him, look, yeah, because his dad's been there with the father, you know, so his dad will tell him, don't fall for these, you know, stupid mind games. You just focus on your game, go in there and fight. And I do feel like it can be dangerous for Conor if he fights on pure emotion, because, you know, when you fight on emotion, we've seen it on plenty of occasions. Like, for example, just to go a bit off topic, do you remember when AJ fought Dillian White in 2015? You saw, you know, he comes all guns out blazing, you know, you tire out and all that stuff. And he's in there against a bigger guy. So that could affect him down the stretch, and naturally bigger man. So I feel like he needs to obviously stay switched on. And I feel like I don't know who I see winning this fight, to be honest. It's still quite early for me to decide. But as long as Conor Ben can switch on, go in there with a real intent to stick it on him from early, I feel like we can be in for quite a big fight.
Well, I just find it a little bit. I think it's got to be pointed out. All this talk about Conor Ben fighting on emotion. Don't forget his dad did that. Nigel Ben fought on emotion, and sometimes it worked in Nigel Ben's favour. Nigel Ben was one of the most dangerous fighters when he was hurt. You know, when he was reckless. So for me, yeah, I think it favours Conor in so many different ways. Chris Eubank winding him up this way. If it gets him angry, so be it. There's nobody better to caution to channel that anger than his dad. So we're going to have to see how that one pans out. But yeah, we're coming to the end now, guys. So I'll just quickly read out this one from Chris. Ben taking risk, in my opinion, stepping up to fight a middleweight. We saw Brooks stepping up to fight Golovkin. We know how that panned out. With respect, Eubank Jr. is not Golovkin. That is true. But at that point, I mean, credit to Cal Brook. People say he shouldn't have took that fight. I kind of argue it was worth taking. He got well paid for it. Yes, he got some serious facial damage. But in my opinion, I had 2 rounds to Cal Brook, because when Cal Brook was landing those uppercuts, he was pushing Golovkin back, not hurting him, but causing Golovkin problems. Golovkin doesn't like being faced with uppercuts. The similarities and differences with Eubank Jr., because Eubank Jr. doesn't hit as hard as Golovkin. And this new Eubank, who was formerly trained by Roy Jones Jr., doesn't throw a lot of punches. So if you're Conor Ben, you're thinking, okay, he's bigger, but he doesn't hit that hard, and he doesn't throw a lot of shots. So if I'm busy and I jab and I move out the way and I use my legs, I'm in with a chance here. That's probably his thinking. So John, thanks for joining us this evening. Helenius is going to be a problem for Deontay. Surely means Deontay. Yeah, I think Deontay. I think Deontay Wilder's going to walk through Robert Helenius. To be honest with you, I don't think he's going to cause him too much problems. Very quickly, Josh, what do you think? Do you think he's going to cause him Wilder any problems?
I'll be honest. At first, I thought I did, and then I've actually been rewatching a couple of Helenius fights. Chisora beat him. I know we're going back 10 years. Dillian White won 10 of the 12 rounds. He's a big guy, Helenius, and I think he could potentially cause Wilder some issues if he leans on him. We've seen Wilder doesn't like that, but his chin's wide open. His chin's out there waiting to be hit. And the one thing you can't knock Deontay Wilder for, as much as I like to give him some stick, is his power. If he lands on Helenius is going to crumble. I think he wins it in the first 4-5 rounds, personally.
Yeah, I pretty much say the same thing. Guys, we're gonna wrap it up there for this evening. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your comments in the live chat. I just want to let you guys know we're going to be live again on Monday night. We've got a very special guest joining us on the live. We've got Southern Area Champion Jack Hughes, who's going to be joining us. So don't forget to ask Jack any of your questions regarding his career and get his thoughts, because he's really knowledgeable, really insightful. Get his thoughts on the fight cards that we've just been previewing and reviewing, and also for the big weekend ahead next week with Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. I'm sure Jack's got plenty to say about that particular fight. But guys, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you on Monday night.
Cheers, guys.